Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us on the JS Mindset Weekly Call. My name's Denny, and today is Saturday, September 28, 2019. On the call today are the boys, Les One. Jim Sinclair and the famous Dave are with me, and Bill Holter is still traveling, but he promises to be back with us for next week's call. Guys, in my lifetime, I don't believe I've ever seen a political environment quite like what we as Americans are living through. Many of us lived through Watergate and various lesser dramas in D.C., but this situation in Washington, D.C. right now is like watching a herd of hyenas dashing after every piece of fresh meat in the scandal of the week. In the midst of all that, there's a lot going on behind the scenes in the financial world. Bill mentioned last week that in the deepest plumbing of our financial structures are signs of panic among the central bankers and planners. It's just not working. And the interventions have absolutely begun again. Call it QE4, if you will. The central bank and the market's management of Frankenstein-like derivatives have begun to compound the debt to layers upon which none of us thought they could go. Literally, in the last couple of weeks, almost $500 billion has been brought in to backstop the overnight cash markets. Something's clearly wrong, and everybody's question is this the big one? And nobody knows, but everyone has an opinion. So the whole idea of these weekly calls is to give you some other things to think about. Your investments, your analysis of current events, your glimpse of what things might look like in the not-too-distant future. But always remember, none of us are giving you investment advice. We're trying to give you another perspective of the economic world just to add to your own perspectives so you can be prepared for what might certainly be some very trying times ahead. As always, thanks for investing in the premium side of JS Mindset. There you have access to Bill's writings, which are still some of the clearest set of thoughts and perspectives on current financial events. And you also get a chance to see what Jim and Dave are posting from things that they're reading. And these are things that we just might miss in our own daily readings and interpretations of current events. So, Jim, with all that, the overnight repo operations are just a mess. In the last several days, many billions of dollars have been injected into the system. And it's about $400 billion, Jim. You always said that the only way bankers can go is QE, and it looks like these markets is where it's begun. Any thoughts, Jim?
Well, go back to 2008, and you'll see the same phenomena. What you're looking at is a need for immediate cash, and there are a few modestly legitimate reasons they've given. The one I favor is that the entrance into a cashless society has unexpected, side effects. Because if you're going into a cashless society, guess what you don't have when they want it? Cash. Now, normally that comes in the size we're seeing now because there's a failure somewhere. And in order to keep the failure from becoming public, you keep the most sensitive of all interest markets, overnight lending, somewhat liquid, meaning you inject $500 million or $500 billion or whatever, or $1 trillion if you have to. Now, these are, according to the indenture of the loan, the piece of paper, to be paid back the next day, but there's nothing to say they can't be renewed. It's like a gold loan is supposed to be paid back every year, but it can be renewed, so it never has to be paid back. And it was the harbinger of the explosion in the over-the-counter market, and it's sort of like hush money to keep quiet what's really going on. Whether it's Deutsche Bank or some bank we don't know, whether it's a huge derivative position somewhere that we're unfamiliar with, there is something out there that's busted. That's why the overnight loans have gone through the roof, to keep quiet the real situation. We all made a point that in the middle of last month it would start, and it started. And, nobody ever promised you a rose garden in the anti-dollar gold. But it's 5.5 years before it's going to be over. You're looking at the beginning of a 5.5-year bull market. And the reason why is the same reason why the overnight and repo market is in shambles. And they can't continue doing what they're doing without exposing the reasons, or get ready, something big is about to happen. That's my answer.
David, I know that you are suspicious of Trump, so I'm going to put this question in a way that can give us all a perspective of what you see different in Trump than what a lot of people see. There are a lot of theories about just where President Trump's loyalties lie. You are very suspicious of him. Many of us believe that he's looking out for everyday Americans, the labor force of the United States, the middle class, the non-elite. Others of us think he's just as much a part of the deep state as every president before him. But Dave, this week was all-out war against President Trump, and in even more rabidness than I've ever seen. Dave, after this last week, I am very much appreciative of your perspective on this war between the deep state and Trump. Are they warring on their own, or is something else going on here, Dave? What are your thoughts?
Well, okay, actually we could approach this from a couple standpoints, and I'd like to starting with a question. What people would need to ask themselves, if Donald Trump is the champion of the little guy, they're going to have to explain to me and themselves, when did he come to that come to Jesus moment? His whole life he's been a bully developer. I know people who have done business with him personally. He's ruthless. He tries not to pay for work that he has agreed to, that has been performed, and he fights you in a court. It went on in my friend's case 5 years, and she ultimately prevailed and got paid. So my question to anybody who thinks he's a great guy and he's championing for the little guy, I would have to ask you, at what moment in time did he see God and come to that conclusion? Now, that's a question that everybody could ask themselves. Let's move forward and answer your question about the deep state. I view this as like the mafias fighting each other. They're all in the mafia. They're all made members. They're made members of Congress, there's made members of Senate, and there's the made member who right now heads the mafia. And they're always fighting amongst each other, and they're always killing each other, because all they're doing is fighting for who gets control of the whole pie, even though it is a continuing criminal enterprise. So when we look at this picture of the media attacking Trump, I have to ask myself, what was Trump's prior occupation before he became president? A reality TV show. It was made to entertain. It was made to distract. Politics distracts people from a lot of things they should be paying attention to. And when I say that, there's a lot of things going on in the world that just get swept under the rug. Mainstream media is a propaganda mouthpiece for the total mafia. And I'll use as an example of that, Palestine is in their 76th week of weekly protests. I sent you the facts. There's over 7,500 of them shot. I think 3,400 of them dead. There were 32 shot this past Saturday alone. And the mainstream media doesn't touch it. But all we saw all week long in every single major publication is Hong Kong, Hong Kong, Hong Kong, Hong Kong. Trump's bad. Trump's bad. And, and then you could throw in the climate thing, which we'll cover later on. But all I'm getting at, Denny, is what people have to realize is 99% of what they see and hear is a theater. It's a show to distract them. They've already got their sides. My conservative friends think that the liberals are attacking Trump, and this just shows what scum they are. And then I go sit with my liberal friends, and they say, see what a scumbag he really is. Everybody's mind is made up. We're not moving the Jell-O from one side of the plate to the other. We just shake the Jell-O every day, and it gives people something, both sides, to bicker about, because as long as you're divided, you're conquered. And that's how I look at the big picture of life. The name of the game, the oldest military strategy on the planet, is divide and conquer. And with the information operation that's run against the world, it's easy to see how it happens. Iran's bad. Iran, now France, England, and Germany all agree that Iran did it. Did they present 1 ounce of proof? No, but we're all in agreement, damn it. And anybody who doesn't believe it is a denier. Okay, so put me in the denier camp, because I don't believe it till I'm showing proof. And then I would fall back to, even if they did it, tough cookies. You've been picking on them forever. You box them into a corner, and you get what you deserve. So all I'm getting at, Denny, is just what the media throws out there is usually just red meat for one side or the other. I hope
Dave,
that gives everybody a perspective.
Yeah, let me come at this just at maybe a 60-degree angle here. There was that scene in The Godfather when they got all the families together. You said that they're like the mafia. And I remember that Sonny was talking to his father and said, well, Tattaglia has made peace. And the Godfather says, Tattaglia's a pimp. Barzini is the man that's pulling the strings. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out, Dave, is who's pulling the strings on the deep state and attacking Trump. I can't figure out if he's part of the deep state. Well, who's after him? Is it just flat out everybody?
Well, he's a great whipping boy. You got to admit, Denny. I mean, just look at it this way: if you would just, and not you, but if the president would just stop shooting his mouth off, the hurricane's going to hit Alabama. The hurricane's going to hit Alabama. I'm somewhat of a weather buff. And I'm like, looking at this scenario, go, why would you say that? Do you know why? Because he's like that kid in the classroom who just can't stop running his mouth. He seems to thrive on it. He's been through more cabinet people than anybody could count. When they come in, they're the greatest people in the world. I know that personally. They're suited for the job. Well, then how come every year you go through a new one? Either you are the worst picker of employees or everybody's out to get you and you picked the wrong people to begin with. So, again, Pompeo's still there. Iran is still the boogeyman. Now there's talk again that we're going to bomb Syria because we now know they use chlorine gas. Anybody who's examined this knows that's a farce. This is all made up. So I have a hard time seeing, where he's not part of the problem. You don't see him sending out tweets stating that, this report out of Syria is garbage. No, he's backing it 100%. So, again, everybody's got to decide who they think the deep state is. The deep state is the ultimate power. I think if you go back to who backed Donald Trump, you look at Rothschilds, look at Wilbur Ross, look at his lawyer, Roy Cohen. His personal lawyer, Roy Cohen, is one of the scariest people on the planet. He was a homosexual, disbarred lawyer who was essentially a criminal. And now his current lawyer is also in jail. So like my mother used to say, you are what you hang around with.
My mother said the same thing. Hey, Jim, I got a question from a listener. The listener's name is Jack. He says, please ask Jim, if I can live on $70,000 a year right now, how much gold and silver do I need to have in the vault today in the United States to survive hyperinflation? Now, Jim, that's on the surface, it's deceptively simple, but it's not. Jim, how does one? It's not. But it's not. How does one go about? How do you calculate something like that? $70,000 today.
If he told me he had $70,000 in the bank and how much gold did he need, we'd have a very simple answer, which would deal with inflation-adjusted grams of gold. That would tell you how much gold you need. If he has $70,000 worth of gold in the bank today, and gold as a minimum, absolute minimum is $3,500, probably $5,000, more likely $50,000. Just stop spending a lot of money. Enjoy. You got enough.
Well, here's what he's asked, though. In today's dollars, he's spending $70,000 a year. All right, so he's spending almost $6,000 a month. What he wants to know is how much do I need in the vault in order to maintain $6,000 a month, ballpark. That's a tough calculation.
It is a tough calculation because he's confused it in twice now. Okay, but let's take it on. A man spending $6,000 a month. First thing you do is cut back on your spending. Okay, not that $6,000 a month for a high middle class doctor or something isn't unusual, but the first thing you do, as I've done, and as I'm sure all of us who speak here have done, it brought our lifestyle to a level where we don't stand out like a sore thumb, as a Connecticut fund manager does, or a hedge fund manager. So let's say he gets down to around 5,000, and he has 5,000. He has needs which equal 5,000 a year. Gold is going to at least triple, definitely double. So he's going to require, I would say, ballpark 5 times what he spent, 5 times his yearly spending in gold to remain a very rich man. And that is back of the envelope, but sometimes I'm right.
You know what? I tried to do this. Of course, I knew the question ahead of time because I was reading Jack's email.
It's asked backwards, you know.
Yeah, it is. But you did a good job. I came a little bit higher. I'd said about $500,000 in gold. You're about 350 or so, but basically the same answer, Jim. About $500,000 in gold should be able to help him maintain his lifestyle. Realizing that with
why maintain a lifestyle if the whole thing goes to hell? You want to stand out more?
Yeah, that's a big question too.
That's a big question too. What you want to do is live like the guy next door, but maybe a little cleaner and a little neater, and maybe your driveway's swept. And if it really gets bad, it's nice if you had a motor home somewhere in the north, above the 45th parallel in the United States in the north, because nobody's walking up there in the wintertime without shoes on.
No. I think I'm going to tell my wife after this that, honey, I'm almost as smart as Jim Sinclair. We came to the same conclusion, only from different directions. She won't believe it.
It's a tough question. We had to get a little eclectic to answer an eclectic question.
All right. So, Jack, the answer is between $350,000 and $500,000 in today's dollars. That should get you pretty close.
Yeah, and I reduced my standard. I wouldn't stand out like a sore thumb, and I might have a $200,000 beautiful motorhome used, sitting in a woodlot somewhere in northern Vermont. That's where I'll be.
Or maybe in Dave's compound. Hey, Dave.
Who knows where Dave is? Dave is friggin' moon for all we know.
Yeah. Hey, Dave. Trump has been dropping hints about Greenland, and I tried to run that rabbit trap. I did a little bit of research and found out that there's a lot more going on in Greenland than most folks would know. But now Trump's talking about Iceland. Dave, have you heard anything through your perusals about Greenland or Iceland, secret bases or experiments? Have you gotten any word of all that?
No, but what I would put into perspective is Russia and China are setting up the Silk Road going through the north. We are looking to keep an eye on it. And, again, I believe, and I know we do have air bases already. I believe it's in Iceland or Greenland.
It's in Greenland, Dave. Yeah.
Is it right? It's been a while. So in any case, what I'm getting at is, Russia is claiming a lot of territory up there. And again, it's, the geography allows them to do that. China is also befriending Russia, which is obviously, and the new Silk Road running over the top as opposed to going around to get to Europe is something from a business standpoint that kind of doesn't favor us, is the best way to put it. So, to look for the simplest solution, because there could be hidden solutions, there could be hidden bases, but a lot of it, I would guess, is we're looking to gain more of a foothold in the Arctic, is the best way to put it. I wouldn't read too much into it because, again, Donald, if you were really trying to hide this, would you shoot your mouth up and say, I'm going to buy Greenland? It's not even for sale. I mean, again, when we get into crazy things that he says, it's like, what would possess a world leader to make a statement like that unless you just wanted to agitate? Because as you're saying, if it truly was a secret base, the last thing that the intelligence department would want him doing is shooting his mouth off. Is that correct?
Yeah, unless he's wanting to get under the skin of the intelligence department, and he doesn't have any friends in what I would call the CIA right now.
Has no friends.
Well, yeah, but you can't say that because you say he doesn't have any friends. Who do you point? Gina Haspel. Think about who Gina is. Gina is the deep state. Gina was behind the secret prisons. Mike Pompeo, he's CIA, is he not?
Yes, sir.
What was Mike Pompeo? So I don't see that people say he has no friends. And I mean, I don't see that. That's not how I view
they
it.
couldn't be friends. You know,
He has complete control
a
of
hard
Gina.
time being friends, except that's the game they play. Excuse me.
I'm sorry,
You know.
Dave. What did you say there at the end?
Well, again, you have to look at why is Pompeo there? If Pompeo was CIA, the head of the CIA, Donald obviously could fire him. He hasn't fired him. Is he afraid of him? Not a chance. He's fired everybody else from Mattis to, Scaramucci. He's fired everybody, just like on his TV show. This is all, in my opinion, the best reality TV show to keep the public riveted to your TV. Buy the damn newspaper. Everybody get in there and blog their nonsense. Because in the end, the ship of state, in my 60-something years, has never changed direction since they smoked Kennedy. And I have had this argument with my friends who are ardent Trump supporters. Where Trump lost me, when he came out and said he was going to release all the CIA documents relating to the Kennedy assassination, I said, all right, he's for real if he does that. But he didn't do it. Not only did he didn't do it, the whole story went away. The whole Q story went away about releasing all this information. None of it's been released. So in my mind, there is no way that that's ever coming out. And if that's never coming out, then we're never going to find out the truth of what's going on in America. And this reality TV show will just click on from one president to the next, as I've watched for 60-something years.
What the theory that I've heard, Dave, and it may or may not be true, is that he is engaging members of the deep state in order to learn how they operate, and then he cuts them loose. And whether it was his first Secretary of State, and I cannot remember him, the guy from the oil companies, whether it was Mattis or Bolton, that he is using them to understand how they work, and then he's going to cut them loose. But time's going to tell. I too was waiting for the Kennedy papers to be declassified. I hope he still does that. If he does that, then I'm like you. I'll know that he is for real for sure. Jim, I read this piece this week written by Gary Christensen, and I read it on Miles Franklin's site. In the article, he compared the current banking system and the economic system to a quasi-game of musical chairs, and he kept talking about what happens when the music stops. Well, the music stopped several times in history. We can look at the 1929 market crash, the music stopped. The 1933 confiscation of gold, music stopped. In 71, Nixon closed the gold window, the music stopped. In 87, the music stopped. In 2000, the dot-com crash. We've got all these. The last one was 2008, the subprime mortgage crash. So, Jim, we're due for another when the music stops event. Christensen says the music is clearly slowing down. But when do you think it's going to stop, Jim?
When they run out of the ability to calm the repo overnight money market, and the increase in that rate, then, like all interest rates, affects the next interest rate, and for no good reason whatsoever, because take a look at the German economic statistics; they couldn't be worse. Our statistics have been so bastardized, since 1970 that they probably will never show a bad economy. It started, and if we could talk about Bill, who's not with us today, he's got it nailed in credit. The bottom line is there is nothing but IOUs out there everywhere. And there isn't enough collateral to make those solid. And the collateral that exists can never be converted because of the downward pressure that will come on the collateral as a result both of an attempt to conversion and bad business conditions, the true condition of the United States economy. So it's happened. And all these things we've seen, such as the over-the-counter derivative, they stopped it. No, they didn't. It got worse. The banking problems, they stopped it. No, it didn't. They covered it up. Savings and loan problem, fixed it. No, they didn't. They just let all the boys on the inside have government guarantees to take over the junk and merge it together into something that might work. And all of that is coming down on our heads. We have kicked the can down to the end of the road. Okay? And having kicked the can down to the end of the road, there's nowhere to go, defined by the Fed, and all central banks have no tool whatsoever to get more space and time. I don't think up to the elections. And having no more time, space or time, they also have no more room on the balance sheet. Because although the Fed can manufacture whatever funds they want and be their own beard through Belgium and the Grand Caymans, buying their own bonds to effect a form of QE, that all will come back to haunt the dollar. And, one of the facades required is the king dollar. And it's no more, when you say the king has no clothes on, it's the understatement of the age. So it's the dollar falling as fast as other currencies might look like the USDX unchanged. But it's all falling together. And it's so hard for people to understand what I just said. More difficult is to understand that markets are all gone. That computers lacking fear and lacking emotions completely and lacking greed react to their algorithms, creating prices for which there's no logic, and the story is made up every day of why the market did this or why the market did that, and it's the market did it, not the story. So everything that we put a Band-Aid on has come off. And the key to it is the short-term money, the shortest-term money market as the beginning of the minefield. It's happened. It's not when it's going to happen. It's happened.
Jim, you mentioned Germany. Let me give you a perspective of the work week in Germany. I had an opportunity to interview some CEOs from Germany several years ago, and they said, watch the weekly work week. So a couple of years ago, well, I guess 5 or 6 years ago, they were only allowed to work to a maximum of 48 hours in Germany, but the typical work week was 35, 38 hours, something like this. Last year, or 2 years ago maybe, they got the opportunity, they won in negotiations. They could opt to only work 28 hours a week for up to 2 years before they returned to the standard 35-hour week. Now, if I were a business, I can't put on any more shifts. That would take me to a 4-shift work week or a 4-shift work day, and yet I don't see the German economy supporting that. Should we expect a slowdown where GM's on strike right now, Ford's status has just been lowered to junk. What can we expect as far as a work week, do you think, for average Americans who were employed by these large engineering-type firms, which is what I'd call GM or Ford or the like? Or you think we're going to see in the negotiations that we go to shorter work weeks?
I would say that the position of any of the gaggle of people running for office on the Democratic side is a form of AOC. And part of socialism is you don't work. And the probability is that everything is, in fact, headed in that direction because there is no Republican Party and there is no Democratic Party. There is, as David said, the deep state. And the elections coming up, you either have your choice of what we have now, because the Dems are never going to stop trying to put Trump in jail, and if you get Pocahontas or the past vice president in office, what is it going to look like? It's going wildly social. So the only defense against that is to have two things. One, that entity which has for thousands of years demonstrated the ability to hold buying power, gold or silver, I prefer gold, or a skill so necessary that it can be sold at any price, cure cancer, okay? Don't worry, you'll sell your pill. There's nothing going to stop this, fellas. The deep state, in my opinion, is every bureaucrat in the world. That's the outside of it. The inside of it, I kid with you all the time, could be Pope Francis. Who knows? Now, for the Catholics, I don't want to get them crazy because I was born a Catholic. But it's whoever runs it is the least you'd expect. Just like, who are the spooks of the CIA? They're all Mr. Ferps, most of them. You think there's an 007 there, you're out of your mind. They're the least likely people to be spies, are spies. And the least likely head of the deep state is the least likely, probably least known, of a upper middle class, maybe a little higher than that, who owns an aquifer in South America, and has a name that if you said, you'd recognize an old European family. Okay? They hide right in front of you, but they hide well. And every single bureaucrat comes to an end if the deep state comes to an end, so the entire thing tries to stop that from coming to an end. The guy in the license department who stamps your license is part of the deep state because he's a bureaucrat. They all are. And they all know very well that they can't be fired unless someone cleans up the swamp. Chance of the swamp being cleaned up, therefore, is zero.
Okay.
And we are headed for social state. There's no way around it. All the kids want it. Guys our age, don't count. Geezers forget that's the culling of the geezers is part of the operation. And there's one direction we're moving, and you need a second coming or a statesperson, male or female, that could lead with unity against the insanity that now is common political thought. Period. End. Where is that?
Yeah, let me ask Dave a question. That same article, Dave, that Christensen wrote, that I just asked Jim about, he said, when this music stopped, he said there's a lot of non-truths out there that make people think that things are going to be different this time. So he issued this sarcasm alert, and let me read some of them to you, Dave. There's peace now in the Middle East. Past hatreds are forgiven and forgotten. Politicians are more truthful than they've ever been before. Central bankers care about Main Street and the bottom 90% of citizens. China, Russia, the U.S. are all cooperating for mutual benefit, and this list goes on. But, Dave, I've heard you say so many times in the last couple of years that nothing has changed. So here's the question, brother. What will it take for things to really change where no sarcasm is even inferred? You just mentioned one of them, if the Kennedy assassination files are open. But, Dave, what's it going to take for things to really change?
Again, see, I'm in the camp of can't. That's why I believe we have to go to hyperinflation, that we are going to end up in a situation where if you don't have gold or silver, you're going to have nothing. I am not in the camp that, there's no Boy Scout in me. There is no white knights in my life. I'm a survivalist. Either you could cover your own butt or you're toast. And I don't mean to sound that harsh, but, people who have extended families, who have grandchildren and have children, they have to, in their mind, they have to convince themselves that it's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. A buddy of mine just turned me on to a documentary about World War I. And, you're looking at these bodies hanging in barbed wire. The rats are eating them. I mean, we're not the most civilized society that's ever lived. Now, that's just nonsense that's fed to us. We're indoctrinated in it. We're cannon fodder. Smedley Butler talked about it years and years and years ago. We're cannon fodder. Like George Carlin says, it's a big club. We're not in it. We're just essentially parasites occupying their space. And when they decide that they don't want us occupying their space, they're going to do something about it. And, again, whether they're going to cull society, whether it's a disease, whether it's war, whether it's famine, I don't believe things are going to get better. I think the only thing we have to look forward to here is things getting worse. And that's why I keep trying to explain to people that's how I plan. Hope for the best, plan for the worst, because right now, you could say throughout the last 5,000 years, every single empire has collapsed. If that is true, then to think that that's not going to occur here would be incredibly naive. And again, that's why I like going to the Sacker blog or Dimitri's blog, because they went through watching it happen in Russia. And to pay attention to what they're saying, because they give you the road signs, and both of them are saying similar things that I am. That, you know, this is a one-way ride. And as Jim's saying, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, but not in my lifetime. I'm preparing for what I think is a complete collapse of civilized society as we know it, and anything short of that is a bonus.
And the road to new is destruction of the old. It always has been, and it always will be. You know, you are absolutely correct. Nothing's going to change this. In the next 5.5 years, this place is going to look a lot different than it looks now, and that will eventually change. And the very articulate teenager that forecast a total wipeout of civilization in 10 years, well, maybe not in 10 years, but that's the only thing that could change it, okay? And, this existence we have as human beings is purely cyclical. You go back to deep time, okay, and to the present, and look at the progress from whatever we were to what we are now. You think that process is over? You think this is all there is? You think that the world 1,000 years today will look like we look? Just do the right thing. Protect yourself. Don't get carried away into the age of technology. Maybe throw your computer in a lake. And have some peace. Love all, trust no one. And that being your mantra, go forward and hope for a better world.
Jim, let me take you back to that repo market for just a second. In 2008, when the overnight market seized up, it was because the subprime mortgage debt packages became suspect. Nobody in the overnight markets trusted anything, and they were using those subprime loans for collateral in the overnight markets. It just dried up. It took a lot of money and a lot of backstopping for the Fed to finally back up everything with U.S. Treasuries. And then the market stabilized. Jim, I'm struck by the fact that we have moved back into instability in spite of the backing of overnights with Treasuries. Now, if nobody trusts anybody for even 24 hours, especially in U.S. Treasuries, Jim, what's the next step? What is there for people to trust?
Well, the next step will be a Cipro currency. That will be called something like a treasury. And it will be gold at a much higher price, not convertible, but to increase the balance sheets of all central banks. And that will be the geniuses trying to do a reset. But what they'll do is, by mistake, they'll tip the market off to more of the same isn't going to do any darn good. And then you're going to get the market making the final reset. And the final reset is going to be a great leveling. And exactly as David expects and Bill expects, it's going to be totally across the board. And things are going to be difficult. There is, you can't explain the leading shares that are selling now on a basis of fundamental worth. And that started to come apart because your new deal market looks real shaky. And the new deal market looks real shaky because everybody knows that the problem with overnight money is a failure somewhere. I mean, the people who understand money. And eventually, those people are going to be looking for what, in fact, will sustain them. And those that haven't already or haven't been buying standards like gold over the past decade are all going to try it in the same day. And then China and Russia make the market in gold, not by convertibility, but simply, what's the price of gold? 50,000 bid, 50,000 ask. What would you like to do? Oh, I only wanted to quote. Anything they want it to be. And the entire fiat currency system is an illusion. It is a Potemkin city. And it's raining on the cardboard buildings, and they're coming down. There's nothing to change this except the second coming or a statesman or stateswoman. And where are they? Where in that bunch of hacks that want to be president, all of them, is there somebody who would sacrifice themselves for their country? Okay?
They would sacrifice any of us for themselves, but not for their country.
How about the men who didn't have to get involved, who have gone over in many of the battles? How about the guys that came down out of the helicopters to save the helicopter pilot, and that is the one pilot that was down, and the officer said, you know what you're doing, because he meant they're never coming back, okay? And these guys went down, and it's true, they went down a line, hung from a helicopter, they rappelled down, they saved the pilot, they killed at least 70 guys trying to come into the compound or more, and, of course, got snuffed themselves by simply running out of ammunition. Where are those people who would give their lives for the other? Where's the greatest example of love is that you give your life for someone else? Where are they? I've got an Army commendation hanging right at my front door. A young man who I know, Little Donnie, decided to join up and go fight in the Middle East. Well, Little Donnie was Little Donnie. I mean, he'd last about a day. And he didn't have to go in for 6 or 7 months, so I sent him to Taekwondo. And before he went in, he could carry his sensei on his back and run. That's a commendation of him capturing 37 guys. He gave me 5 passports when he came home. You know what that means. Those are the 5 guys he snuffed. There's not a whole lot of young Donnies around. There is a patriot. There is a person who would give his life for his country, who is a good father. He's a professor. He's everything you'd want to be. But, he don't want to go near politics because he'd be torn to pieces. So the system is set up to destroy anybody who would try. We must go through what that little lady said in the United Nations, the teenager. But it's almost a normal factor that's existed through the millenniums of time. Empires rise, empires fall. Neanderthal rules, the Neanderthals gone. We're running the show, maybe we're going to be gone. But take care of yourself and do the best you can. Don't try and maintain your lifestyle, look like the guy next door, and be happy and take whatever comes. What else are you going to do?
Yeah, with that, Jim, let me ask Dave a question. Dave, I had some cousins come in from Australia. We've got extended family over there, and they come here because it's wintertime over there and we're upside down. But one of the first discussions I heard at dinner was about global warming. And it was absolutely amazing to me that this one topic has permeated international discussions in this topic of fear. This little teenager you were talking about, Jim, I just think she's been brainwashed like so many of us. Dave?
She's articulate.
Yeah,
okay?
but here's the point. Yeah, Dave, fear is used to control populations, and yet the fact that is the dire predictions of the last 50 years regarding the environment have never materialized. They've scared the snot out of this poor child, and as they have a whole generation. Dave, do you think the population will ever see through this ruse of fear being used to control them?
No, I don't, Denny. And I sent you a link to a story that I thought was, and again, you know the story then.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the first Desert Storm. George Bush was trying to build consensus to, we're going to kick Iraq out of Kuwait. Well, first off, we were the ones who let Iraq go into Kuwait, but that's a whole other story for another day. Now, George Bush turns around and says that, okay, here's how we're going to do this. And we play this game that we take the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter, and she gets up before Congress and gives this big, long spiel about how the Iraqi soldiers are taking the babies out of the incubators and they're throwing them on the floor and taking the incubators. Oh, my God, this saved my country. I get a gag reflex every time I see they put a kid up to do this because, again, it's theater. If you had the facts, why would we resort to theater? So, and again, because you've got to keep the population on the edge of their seat, just like they're watching The Apprentice, and the whole world has played this game. And I'm not even getting into the people who want to say, is there or is there not global warming? I will tell you what very good friends of mine who are very top-shelf scientists have said. The planet has been warming since the day the Ice Age ended. Now, does that mean it's going to continue warming? We've gone through warming periods before, and we've gone through small ice ages. So there is, you could argue that, well, of course the climate's always changing. The big argument, is it man-made, and what is the real issue to the climate? And I would point people to look more towards the ozone problem than the CO2 problem. And the ozone problem seems to be a much bigger problem than the CO2. I don't even know that CO2 is a problem. I do know that depletion of the ozone is a major problem. We have been unable to reverse it. Every time we shoot a rocket through the ozone, we blow holes in it. So I get back to Denny. It's when everybody's on the same side of the boat, you're probably being buffaloed.
I hate it when they say this. Yeah, I hate it when they say this is settled science. I just say baloney. It's settled science. But let's move on. We're just suckers for the ruses. Hey, Jim, you have grandkids, and the kids of today have been exposed to more technology and propaganda that Dave has just mentioned than any generation before them. They have filters in place now that literally filter out common sense and truth. They have been so brainwashed they can't see reality in front of them. So, Jim, here's your question. If you could tell your grandkids something to protect them from all of this, what would you tell them, Jim?
Back to basics. Take the cell phone, take the computer, take that tablet, throw it in the pond. Okay? Learn how to play again. Okay? Try reading. Try respecting your family. Try respecting your elders. Go back to the beginning. Because if you don't, you're just gonna move from one shock to another shock to another shock. We all have to go backwards to go forwards, because there's nothing in that technology other than artificial intelligence left to happen. Artificial intelligence doesn't happen. It doesn't exist yet, because artificial intelligence teaches itself. What we call artificial intelligence is what we teach something to do. It might be very complex what we teach them, but we do. But all of a sudden, these machines start teaching and start moving on their own. Do you think the society is going to survive that? Hawkins didn't, and Hawkins is one of the smartest men that ever walked.
Well done, Jim. Dave, I'm going to ask you the same question in a different way. You're a businessman. You're a successful businessman, and you've seen the past, and you've got a good idea what the future is going to be like. Dave, what advice would you give to small business owners, even all businesses, to prepare for what's coming at us?
Buy a farm. Dead serious. I said to my wife the other day, we're backing out of the driveway, and she knows how aggravated all this nonsense makes me. And I said to her, do you know what? You know who are the really smartest people? Farmers, because they didn't have to deal with this. They got up and they fed themselves. They knew the chores that needed to be done, to put the wood away for the winter, depending on where they live, how to store their own food. And when they needed help, whether it was building a barn or moving a stone, they called the other farmer who was their friend when they rode over on the horse. And it was I don't want to say it was almost better. It had to have been better, because people thought clearly. Right now, we have so many modern distractions. It's like it's hard to focus. Because as you said, be it global warming, be it the political scene, it's in your face 24/7, nonstop. Somebody tweeted this, somebody's Instagram's that, somebody Facebook this. I'm like, when do you people have time to slow down and reflect and think? And I mean truly think. I was a salesman for years and years and years. And the times that I drove from appointment to appointment, sometimes an hour, gave me time to think, because I didn't have cell phones back then. You know, you had an AM, FM radio, and I wasn't really a radio head. So I would think, I would plan, I would think about how my day's going to go, what deals I wanted. You had time to think. I don't think people think anymore. They react. And that's why the present political scene is absolutely perfect to control the masses, no matter what side they're on, because you just have them reacting. Whether that's the right reacting or the left reacting, I can tell you how they're going to react to almost any statement made. And I truly am not left or right. I am not liberal or conservative. I'm just a facts-based person. Let's take one question at a time. Ask me it, and I will give you my opinion. And, hopefully I get some of it right.
Dave, let me talk about that farm for just a second. I had a friend who was the brother of a pretty well-known congressman in the Midwest. And this brother always said that his congressman brother always said that you could survive on 10 acres, half of it in woods, 3 acres for crops, and if everybody got back to a 10-acre farm, you could survive forever. I'm shocked that I remembered that when you said get a farm, but that's exactly what my brother Dave, his name was Dave too, that's exactly what he said. We're going to have to approach things from a different perspective, that's for sure. Guys, that's all I have. Yeah,
Jim,
go ahead.
If I could for a moment.
Yeah.
What David said was brought home to me about a month and a half ago, when a very simple eye operation went wrong, and for 3 to 5 days I couldn't see a thing. I was blind as a bat. And since then, very slowly, things have come back. But I had that very short period of time where I was thrown totally back on myself. In other words, if you can't see, you can't read. And if you can't see, you can't write because you can't see what's going on a piece of paper. And I had the experience of not having any technology, because what can you do if you can't see it? Nothing. Or talk to Siri or something like that, which is a joke. David is absolutely correct. And just like the climate is changing and there's nothing we can do about it, just like there was nothing that the Neanderthals could do about it, and it was probably climate change that took them out because they were made for cold weather, and guess what? The Ice Age ended. And these little guys, with big chests and long noses to heat the air so they could breathe, and the same thing with their mouth, slight foot, all just didn't make it because they couldn't compete. The largest animal in the sea, the 60-foot shark, was taken out by faster little tiny sharks that ate all their seals, and then there was no seals left to eat, so there goes the big megalodon or whatever the thing was. I used the wrong name there, but it sounds good. These changes we can't stop. They're going to continue. So the idea that we take care of ourselves, unleash ourselves from this demon of technology, get back to basics in finance and in living, is the only way you're going to mentally, psychologically, spiritually, and otherwise survive a change you cannot stop that's been going on since the beginning of time. Not to scare anybody, but look around you. Look, I'm out of the 40s and 50s. What a simple world. My wife wore a poodle skirt and a cardigan. Everything was easy. The rules were the rules. Break the rules, you get. I really got a great affection for my father-in-law when he threw me out of his house when we were engaged, because he had had enough of me, and he should have, okay, because that was the engagement period, which wasn't easy. Change is happening. Change cannot be stopped. People are depraved. The educational system has institutionalized that. Today, a girl is a guy is a girl, and that's fine. Don't worry about it. And it's going to continue until it stops. What we're suggesting is go back to basics, whatever your basics are, and financially become sound, be your own central bank with the assets completely much larger than the liabilities, if you have any liabilities at all. And whatever survival is, you will be it. But you go along with what's taking place today, you are cannon fodder, you will suffer, and insanity doesn't lead to pleasure. And the world is changing. It has always gotten hotter. It has always gotten colder. It has never been man's fault. It's always been nature itself. It's not going to stop. So settle down, go back to basics, be happy.
Jim, that story you told about your eyesight is only part of the story, and this will probably be the first time that listeners have heard you speak of it. What I am impressed of is just knowing you for the short period of time and enjoying your friendship. You didn't approach it as a victim, Jim. You approached it as a victor because on day one, you were already putting a support process into place no matter what happened to you. You were blind. None of our listeners. Right. None of our listeners knew about it because you didn't talk about it. And it was a very courageous approach to a devastating health situation. You're getting your eyesight back. But I will say I have rarely seen such an authentic approach to a calamity. And you're a damn good example of how you respond to that, whether it's health, financial, or economic. But Jim, you walk the walk, and you did it, brother. And I hope to God that you get your eyesight back.
Well, if I have what I have today for the rest of my life, which is not much, I'll be happy. This is wonderful. I can see a mountain. I can see green trees. I see a lake, and I see little white spots on the lake, which I think are boats. If that's what I've got, that's what I've got, and that will take good care of me. If I had none of that, I would have figured out by compartmentalizing and solving. Because what else can you do? Woe is me. Who cares?
If I get to heaven and I don't see your ass up there, I'll know I'm in deep trouble. That's what I'm saying, Jim.
You know, that's a lovely thing to say, but you just do what you got to do. Okay? What else can you do?
Yeah, be proud of yourself.
You think anybody cares? You think anybody listening cares? They're all taking care of themselves, and we're trying to help them because we believe in contributing rather than ripping off. That's the whole show.
But listening to you and Dave, the financial calamity is coming. It may be tomorrow, it may be in a couple of years, but it's coming.
Maybe today.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, and Dave, you're going to have the last word here, the fact of the matter is we're going to have to do what Jim did with his eyesight and just sort of stand up and say, I'm going to deal with this because other than that, I'll be dead. Fair statement, Dave?
Yes, it is, Denny. And again, just to elaborate on, obviously everybody listening can't go out and have fun. All small business guys can't do that, nor are they going to. Then what they can do is deleverage, try to put themselves in a position where their exposure is the least amount possible. Because if Jim is right and I'm right, Bill's right and you're right, and we're heading into a economic period of problems, the last thing you want to do is be leveraged. I was there once in real estate in the late 80s, and made for a pretty miserable couple of years of my life. We'll just leave it at that. And as far as the weather goes and the climate changing, I would just like to add to people, because I say to people, before we even talk about what's happening with the weather, you have to look into who's doing what to the weather. And again, people could argue this till they're blue in the face. The facts are quite clear. There has been weather modification programs going on in the world for over 50 years. 50 years. We have corporations conducting them. Volkswagen, to protect the cars in Germany and Mexico, was using a suppression method to stop hailstorms from damaging the cars. The farmers in Mexico were going nuts because they thought it was causing a drought, and it may have been. Volkswagen had to change what they were doing, which essentially was a weather modification program to try and stop the hailstorms that were damaging their cars. So there's so many weather modification programs out there that are being conducted in countries around the world and by private corporations. You never hear it talked about. So let's look at the obvious things, and let's not use kids as actors, because we saw that in Desert Storm with the incubator story. And when I saw this story again, I looked at my wife, because she knows the incubator story. We're like, I can't believe they could roll this trick out again 30 years down the road or 20 years down the road, and the public falls for it. Everybody loves the children. Nobody wants to see bad things happen to the children, or the polar bears, for that matter.
Well, they once were grizzlies, okay? They become polar bears. Why can't they become grizzlies again?
David, I think you would have made a great prosecuting attorney. If you decide you want another career, you'd make a damn good lawyer, brother. Jim, if you got anything else for us before we say goodbye to everybody?
Just a quick vignette, if you will, that for no fault of my own and no violation of law, I ended up in jail in Qatar a couple of years ago. And, I knew what was coming, so I put whatever money I had in my sacks. And they went through the whole thing, and when I was put into a place that was exactly like Midnight Express, if you remember that movie, the guy that got put in jail wherever, Turkey, I think. And the first thing I thought about was when I went in and saw 6 inmates in a cell, they're going to kill me.
Now, were you in business clothes? You were in a suit?
I'm in a striped suit, a round collared shirt, tassel, loafers, okay, a tie, the whole 9 yards. And, by the way, no comb. So within a day or so, I look like Einstein. So I said, they know exactly where my money is because that's where theirs was. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm taking it all out. I'm lining them all up. And in broken English, somebody understood I'm hiring them as my bodyguards. Well, I got out of there before a week had passed. But, I took a shot because if they expected to get that debt was payday next week, I would have been dead. Handle the situation, compartmentalize, solve, and whatever happens, happens. That's what you got to do now.
What a great illustration. What a great illustration,
That's
Jim.
what you got to do now. And the day I got out of that, actually my son-in-law, through a landsman, got the 250 rial fine that I got for doing nothing. It came out of my attaché case at the airport. It went bling. That's all that happened. The money came from my son-in-law, who had a landsman who brought it over and threw it on the desk sergeant's desk, yelled Sinclair, and ran out the door. 250 rial is nothing. I wonder what they wanted him for when he ran out the door. But when I got out, I went a little bit. I started to like these guys because they were my
guys in your prison cell.
Yeah, in the cell. I liked them better than some of the people that I have to associate with now. So on the way out, I said to him, "Look, I'm getting out of here." There was a broken English guy that could pretty well translate for me. So why don't you give me your names, and when I get out of here, I'm going to try and help you out. Then I had a huddle, and out of the huddle came the broken English guy who said, "Jim, we're very sorry, but there's nothing you can do for us." Holy mackerel, what are they in there for? Okay. And I got out. But I got out because I didn't panic. I got out because I looked at the situation and figured out, hey, I'm going to kill me for my money, so I might as well give it over to the start and say I'm hiring you to protect me. That's a prison that I was in where the inmates have the key to their cells and where they lock them at night to keep the other inmates out. There's no guards in there. The guard wouldn't step inside there. 2,000 very angry Arabs and me. Okay. That was quite a situation. When I came back and told my directors, they said, well, we've put up with you so far, but now we really like you. Okay. But
Jim,
the theory is you can't get into the scared. You can't get into getting upset. You take whatever it is, you take it down to its basic thing. That's what I mean by compartmentalize. All this stuff is little things happening all over the place, and it gives you this screen of snow. But you just look at a snowflake, you can actually see it come down. Then you figure out what you do to make it to tomorrow, and you do it. And tomorrow you figure out what you're going to do to make it to the next day. And lo and behold, I got out before payday came up again, so I'm here.
God bless you. Thanks for the story. Guys, I'll hook up with you next week. We'll have Bill back with us at that time. But in the meantime, Jim, stay out of jail, okay?
Believe me, it was an experience, okay?
I bet.
And I was known as Grandpa America.
I'd like to see you in the tights and the skin tight suit.
I never get a break. I'm not a kid anymore. Believe me, I'm Grandpa something. So
guys, we'll talk.
Grandpa America, don't go outside this cell. You'll be okay. They brought me my food. Okay. I mean everything. I didn't walk outside. The biggest problem I had was I was worried. They kept their lavatory very clean, but it's an Arab thing, which is a hole in the ground. And I was praying that I have that I would not need it, because I figured out how the hell do you hit that hole?
Jim, all right, we got to cut you off
sorry,
at that
guys.
point. I love it, guys. David, you have a good week. Thanks for your inputs today. You guys are the highlight of my week. You take care of yourselves, okay?
I'll see you, fellas. This is the highlight of my week. It's fun. I shouldn't have told the last two stories, but the devil made me do it.
Be safe,
Bill
you
wasn't
guys.
around to control me and yell no.
Yeah.
Because he owns all this.
We'll talk to you next week, okay?
See you guys.
Bye now.